Sorry, I was brewing to the theme song there. Uh, Hello, and welcome to another episode of Outside the Lines, the show where we talk about humans and humanity and the things that define us, and sometimes the things we think define us. But before I begin, I just want to acknowledge something. Our hearts go out to the people of Maui, whose island, whose world is being devastated by some terrible forest fires at the moment. If you've been following the news lately, so I would urge everyone to please, if you can help, donate or volunteer your time to any relief efforts in your area, whether it's in your city or your state or just across the nation. Remember that Maui is a part of the Hawaiian Islands and that Hawaii is the United States and is therefore and so therefore they're all Americans. And the good thing about us is that when disaster strikes, we will always help out our fellow Americans. All right. So that said, our on our program today, we are going to talk about one of the fundamental things that define us as human beings, and that is our ability to use language. So, what is language? Language is a set of sounds and symbols to which we have assigned meaning, and that meaning is directly connected to a region or a culture. And by sounds and symbols, I mean uh, the two main components of language, which is spoken language and written language. But those aren't the only two things. There's also symbolic language, as in ASL, which is American Sign Language, in which uses certain hand gestures and partial vocalizations to convey meaning for those who are hearing impaired. So it's a very broad definition of what language is. Um, but language is primarily used for communication. It's the ways that which we communicate our ideas, our thoughts, information from one person to another. Uh, until we develop telepathy, that's all we have to do, or that's all we can do in order to exchange ideas. Now, the word language itself is derived from a Latin word which means tongue. And it literally means that weird floppy thing in our mouths. Uh, but it's evolved as languages do over time. The word language, as we know it, actually comes from Middle French, uh, langue, which also means tongue. And the word tongue is actually Germanic, which I think is pronounced tongue or something like that. So that's one of the beautiful things about language. It's that it's not just one thing. It's all very interconnected with each other. And the history of language is extremely fascinating. Um, and Etymology is the study of words and their history, and it's a fascinating science. Fascinating science. So, to further talk about language and communication and the importance of these things, I want to bring up somebody who has no trouble communicating, as she is my esteemed co-host, as always, the Queen of Hair Hats, Miss Renee Jaworski.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you for that. I am esteemed. I do feel esteemed, and
You are esteemed.
I'm wearing for the first time ever a cat suit. I'm all in black
Oh,
here. Okay.
oh,
And I did that
planning some burglaries, are you?
I I am a cat burglar. I'm gonna steal some cat food and some litter after this. But I
Awesome,
also wanted to
awesome.
talk about communication from the visual side,
Oh,
body
yes, of course.
language, fashion.
Right.
What do we project when we aren't saying anything? What are we saying when we are silent? So that's one of the reasons I did that. I wanted to do something a little bit You can't see the full outfit, but if I were at the gym wearing a cat suit, that means one thing. If I'm on stage, it means another. If I were to go into court as a lawyer, I think that would be frowned upon. It
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
context. So communication and context and visual communication. I wanted to talk about those, but of course, I'm so happy you did this show because you said when you brought me on here that I have no trouble communicating, and I think that's true 99.9% of the time. But if I care too much about something or someone, I go mute and I go
Oh,
so, and I'm going through that right now in my life. It's something I'm very passionate about is trying to encourage people to reach out and to communicate because communication is power because communication is information. And you
right.
might have understood something from someone a year ago, a minute ago, an hour ago, but that might have evolved or changed. And you won't know unless you're constantly getting those updated headlines from
Right.
somebody. So
Right. Yeah.
MM Farwell, she is an executive producer on Journeys. And this Thursday, we're going to have 3 ex-prisoners on the show
Oh.
as a panel show to talk about redemption. MM Farwell is very passionate about redemption. And
Hmm.
if you had spoken to any one of those people maybe 10 years ago, whatever they were communicating to you would have told you one set of data that you might not have wanted to interact with that person. Now
Hmm.
you fast forward, and this might be the healthiest person for you to talk to because they're going to tell you all the cool motivational things that are going to get you really charged up in life.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm happy you did that. That's a big monologue from me, but it just shows I am extremely passionate about this. And my message, I will give everyone a trailer and a spoiler. The basic thing I'm going to keep reiterating for the next 50 minutes for myself is to continually communicate and get that information as it's updating. Don't ever think that you know something long term. Things evolve, people evolve, information evolves. So keep checking in with the people you care about. If you don't care about a person or a situation, who cares? Then just don't focus. But if you really care about someone, if somebody did you wrong, if someone did you dirty, or if you misinterpreted something, keep trying to figure it out because I guarantee you things probably will evolve as you move forward in life. So communication,
Right.
communication, communication.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've always heard is that
Mm.
communication is the key to a healthy relationship. That if you're not communicating with your partner, if you're not talking to them, if you're not telling them how you feel, things that you're thinking about, that's it's kind of a joke
Right.
when somebody, a woman usually asks her partner, her male partner, what are you thinking? And the man is like, nothing, you know. And usually what and this may be a little sexist to say, I don't know, but usually when a woman asks that, it's what they're really asking is, are you thinking of me at that moment?
Yeah, that's what they really
And then
wanna know, yeah.
usually we're not. Usually we're thinking about football or
Don't tell
having a
us
good
that, Manny,
time.
don't ruin the fantasy for us. Don't pull that rug out yet.
I'm sorry.
We wanna believe that we are
You
the
want to believe
raison d'être.
that we're
We
always
want
thinking
to
about you, that we're always thinking
yes,
about, yeah.
obsessively,
Yes.
yes. Just obsessing, just
So
there all day, all night, 4 in the
yeah,
morning, you can't sleep, it's just yeah.
exactly. Waking up. What is she
Mhm.
thinking? Is she thinking of
Yes.
murdering me in my sleep?
Okay, not that direction, Manny. What kind of people
I
do
always got
you
to turn.
know?
I always got to go dark. For some reason, got to
Don't
go
go
dark.
dark, please. No, we don't wanna
Is she
go to
gonna
that
is she gonna do a bobbing on me? I don't know. Have I been an asshole? What's going on?
snip, snip, Manny, snip, snip.
Ah!
If you piss
Well,
off a
this is
woman,
definitely taking a
this
dark
is
turn
taking
here.
a strange Lorena Bobbitt turn. I did
In a
not
strange
expect it.
turn, and this is not at all what I had planned when we started this
I
this
do
topic.
apologize. I
No, no,
apologize.
no, no. That's fine. But no, it's true. Getting back to serious matters here. No, it's
Mhm.
true. Communication is the key.
Yeah.
I know in my own life, with my partner or whatever, um, you know, we had some challenges, some difficulties, but we talked it through and we came clean with each other and said, hey, you know what? This is what I'm feeling. This is where I'm at right now, and it cleared up so many issues. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now I know where you're coming from. Um, and I think that's very important. But not only in relationships, but just in general, and that's one of the things that I think politics is kind of ruined is that politicians unfortunately tend to be very evasive in their language. Very, they say things without saying anything, or they say a lot of things without saying anything,
Right.
to avoid being pinned down on any particular thing. And so that's kind of the opposite of what communication is really supposed to be about, what
Right.
language is supposed to be about. Now, when we talk about language, though, obviously, right now, you and I, we're talking in a particular language. We're talking in English, which is one of hundreds of languages. And that's what I meant when I said that these sounds and symbols are tied to a particular. Stop waving my hand around. Tied to a particular region or culture. Uh, English comes from a particular culture. It comes
Hmm.
mainly from what is now the United Kingdom. It's a hodgepodge of different other languages that came before it. Uh, Anglo-Saxon, a little bit of French, a little bit of Latin, of course, from the Roman conquest, Gaelic, just this hodgepodge. And of course, as it traveled to the New World, then it started becoming, yes, Fred, Germanic as well. Um, it also became mixed in with a lot of indigenous uh, languages, also Spanish, and so on and so forth. And it's still a hodgepodge language.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, and that's what sometimes makes English one of the more difficult languages to learn. Um, we have a video, and this is actually a comedy bit, but I want to show this to kind of in a funny way to show just how difficult it can be to learn English. So roll that beautiful funny footage.
Is this Carlin? Is this Carlin?
No, no, the Gallagher
Gallagher.
one.
Gallagher. Okay,
Yeah.
here we go. Roll that beautiful Gallagher, right? Okay.
BOMB, bomb. TOMB, Tom, no, tomb. If TOMB is tomb, that's boom, the bomb's over. But no, that's bomb, that's tomb. Get ready. Is this calm or coom? No, that's comb. C-O-M-B, comb. P-O-M-B, poem. No, poem is P-O with an E with an M. Now, P-O-E-M, poem. H-O-E-M, home. No, home is H-O with an M with an E. H-O-M-E, home. S-O-M-E, some. No, that's some. S-O-M-E, some. N-O-M-E, numb. No, that's N-U-M-B. The whole doggone thing is dumb.
I was waiting for the watermelon. Where is the
The
watermelon?
water, yeah, he didn't do the watermelon thing there. So, shout out to the late Gallagher there. Um, so yeah, so that in a funny way, it illustrates the difficulty of learning language because you would think that something that's spelled the same way as something else would be pronounced the same way.
Yeah.
But what people forget, as I just said, English is a hodgepodge of
Hmm.
different languages, of what different other languages, different cultures, and so on. And so, what we're seeing is how those other languages influence English. And even though things are spelled the same, like bomb and comb
Yeah. Hmm.
and dumb and so on and so forth, are all pronounced differently because the words change depending on, or the meaning changes and the pronunciation changes depending on different word combinations. And that's the thing
Right.
that I wanted to say also. All languages, when we talk about sounds and symbols, we use those sounds and those symbols, uh, or like I said, speech and writing And those things are inextricably linked. I mean, they're linked together, and we create words to describe the very thing that we're talking about. We call the symbols letters. We call the sounds phonemes, and the way we put them together, and it depends on uh, on certain choices. But like everything else, there are rules to both spoken and written language. Uh, in when we talk about writing, we're talking about grammar, the rules of grammar, how words should fit together. And when we're talking about speech, we're talking about phonemes. Um, Otherwise, it's just it's just a lot of random noise. I mean, we might as well be going beep, blah, blue, blah, blah, you know,
Which is
which
our
is the thing that
AI. You could watch our AI conversation.
exactly. Um, and and speaking of that, I don't know about you, but now I'm bilingual. I can speak English and Spanish, so I understand both. But any other language, unless I know a few words of it, like I know a little bit, a couple of words in French, a few words in French, a few words in German,
Mhm.
in Japanese, Chinese, all that. But for the most part, when a non-native speaker hears another language, that's kind of what it sounds like. It just sounds
Yeah.
like a bunch of random noise. Like it might as well be, Klingon or something, you know. Um, and but that's the main aspect of language is its regionality. Uh, and one of the reasons for that is because uh, now there's a theory. There's a theory going that there was a more or less common language eons ago when we were still our species hadn't fully developed into what we are now, and since that our species developed in what we now call Africa, and so because they were sort of localized, they started developing a very similar language or way of communication. But as humanity began to spread across the globe, that common language started to kind of fall away, and it started evolving as along with human beings into the various languages that we have today. But there are languages that have died along the way because the culture doesn't exist anymore, like Latin, for example. I mean, Latin still exists, but there are few people who actually speak it on a regular basis. Uh, except maybe priests, and even priests don't speak Latin anymore. Certainly, Italians don't speak Latin,
Right. Hmm.
Italian, but it is derived from Latin, so it's still there. But
Hmm.
it's kind of like computer code. The base code uh, inside a computer is, or what's usually referred to by computer nerds as the kernel, uh, is the machine language, uh, and then everything else sits on top of that, and that's the same thing with Latin. Latin is kind of the kernel of a lot of languages, especially around Europe, up into what is now, like I said, what is now the UK, some of it into Northern Africa and the Middle East and so forth, because that was the reach of the Roman Empire at the time. Um, and so a lot of our words have that's why a lot of our words have its basis in Latin as well. Um, so it's a primary language, but there are others as well. Um, and different cultures coming into contact with each other is what creates these sort of polymorphic languages, the polyglot languages like English, as I said earlier. For example, in Spain, Spanish was heavily influenced for a while by the Moors, who were Northern Africa, Northern African people who came in and basically conquered Spain for several centuries. And a lot of their words uh, became mixed in with Spanish. And as Spain moved to the New World, uh, and then became mixed in with, again, indigenous peoples, uh, languages, and so forth, uh, that became another mixture. So there's really no such thing. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no such thing as a pure language anymore.
Right.
Uh, there was a period in France when they were trying to purify the language by excluding a lot of words based in English. They felt that all these English words were intruding into their language, and so they wanted to sort of purify the language. Well, that effort failed because it's impossible. It's impossible to purify language because of this constant influence from different parts of the world. Uh, so yeah, so there's no such thing as a pure language anymore.
Right.
And there's also been attempts to kind of go back or to create a universal language. There was something in, I think, in the 50s or 60s. I should have done a little more research on that, but there was something called Esperanto
Oh
that
yeah,
was supposed to be.
Esperanto.
Do you remember that? There was
I do
supposed to
remember that. Yeah.
there was supposed to be a universal language,
Hmm.
uh, but it was still obviously very heavily influenced with English. But they
Hmm.
were trying to create this where it was, word structure and pronunciation and everything was kind of the same, instead of tomb, bum, comb
Right.
confusion that, it's trying to sort of make spelling similar across the board. But not very many people adopted it, obviously, because I think there's still a sense of, hey, our language is part of who we are, is part of our culture, it's part of our identity, and I think people felt that trying to create this other language was taking that away, taking the uniqueness away from the regionality of language, whether it's English or Spanish or French or whatever. I mean, that we associate those languages with that area. I mean, you can't imagine the U.S. without English, even though there are many other languages spoken here. And but also there've been some efforts to make English the official language of the United States, but it's kind of been rejected, fortunately. Uh, because even though, yes, English is the majority of people speak English, there's so many cultures here. There's always the Hispanic culture, and I'm always proud to speak Spanish when I can to a Spanish speaker. There's French people here. Uh, the Cajuns from Louisiana. They trace their ancestry to French Canada, who to the Quebecese who came down through the Mississippi Delta and settled in Louisiana. So there's that. And of course there's a heavy Asian communities here. We have Chinese people, we have Japanese people, we have Vietnamese people here in their own enclaves, and of course throughout the country, uh, Arabic people, and just pretty much any any nationality you can speak of. It's here in the United States, and they continue to speak their own language, uh, but still they learn to speak English to be able to communicate with the rest of the country. Used to be French was kind of the common language. In fact, it was called lingua franca. Was almost kind of a universal language. If you wanted to communicate amongst people who didn't speak the native language, you spoke French. Well, now English is kind of sort of become that lingua franca. It's kind of becoming the international language because of heavy American influence on the world, uh, especially through our pop culture, especially through movies and television that we export to other countries. And although sometimes they're dubbed over or they're subtitled, uh, there are people who still want to know that still want to hear it in the original language. And people in other countries, in their educational system, they will have they'll have their students learn English apart from their own native languages, their own language tongue. Um, and I really think that we should encourage that here, that language, uh, learning a foreign language, whatever it is, whether it's just one, whether it's Spanish or French or German or Russian or whatever, should not only should be encouraged. I was going to say made mandatory, but a lot of times it's part of an elective, and it certainly should be. Uh, you know, I think people who only speak one language, whether it's English or Spanish or whatever, I always think they're at a disadvantage when it comes to, unless you're not planning to ever leave your hometown or your state or whatever, and only surround yourself with other people who speak English. You're never going to have that experience of being able to travel to another country and being able to speak to people in their native language. People are always impressed when, just like we're impressed if someone from some other country comes and they're able to
Mhm.
speak English, and we're like, oh wow, you speak
Wow, how'd
English
you
still,
learn that? Yeah.
yeah. And it's the same thing with people in other countries. When you hear us speaking in their native tongue, and they're like, oh, you speak whatever,
Mhm.
and it's a matter of pride. And again, it goes back to that matter of pride in that language and that regionality, that culture.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because, just randomly, I saw Pitbull on Howard Stern last night. He's,
Hmm.
the rapper, he's very famous, he's Mr. Miami, okay? He's very Miami. He's a Cuban, his parents came from Cuba, so he
Hmm.
identifies as a Cuban American. His first language was Spanish, and he talked about how there was a year when he was a kid, when he lived in Georgia, and he totally lost his ability to speak Spanish. And
Hmm.
when he moved back to Miami, he really worked on that to try to get that back with all of his friends who are Cubans and all of that. And he said that it was important to him. And Howard Stern said, "Man, I don't know any other languages. Like, why did you even care? It's in America. You just need English." And Pitbull said, "Well, not in Miami. Actually, in Miami, it does behoove you to know Spanish. It opens a lot of doors for you." But he said it connects you to your culture and your family. And he said, for me, that was really important for my identity. And he said, it
Hmm.
also got me a lot of respect from people who, because he has blue eyes and I think he has like blonde hair, he said a lot of people wouldn't trust him from different backgrounds, thinking he's just a regular white guy. And him being able to speak his native language, his, Cuban version of Spanish, he said that really gave him like street cred in a lot of places
Hmm.
where people
Right.
down there in Miami, which is a very international place. If you think about down there in Miami in the
Hmm.
Caribbean, you have Haitians, you have people from all over the place,
Right.
actually.
Right. Right.
But to him, that was really important. And Howard Stern just didn't get it. Howard Stern grew up Jewish in New York, and he said, "Look, I don't ever need to know another language or whatever in Long Island or whatever." But it depends where you are, and it does
Right.
really facilitate. I think it helps to build. I think what Pitbull was saying was it helped to build his narrative so that other people could not foist a narrative upon him. He had
Right.
people who were trying to say, like, you're not one of us. You're too light skinned. You got the blue eyes. We don't really trust you. His accent was off after he came back from Georgia as a kid. And he said he really worked hard to show, no, like, my culture is a part of my identity. I'm not going to leave my countrymen behind, my culture behind. And that's something that he tries to infuse into a lot of his branding. And he said that, like, calling himself Mr. 305, like, all of that, he said that was intentional because he was able to reach out to, and also to record songs in Spanish was important to him. And he said it totally doubled his fan base, just, being
Right.
able to do that. So he said, think as an entrepreneur, he said, it helped me as an entrepreneur to be
Right.
able to do that. And I think that what you're talking about, like, if people are teaching a foreign language in school, that's fantastic because you're learning about another culture. You're learning about a different way that people perceive things. Different languages have different ideas and philosophies behind what they're saying. I
Right.
know Japanese is famous for that. Japanese has all these words for complicated philosophical insights that we've never thought of, like the way that the dappled light comes in through the forest in the afternoon. They have a word for that. And sometimes you're learning another language and you sit down and you say, wow, I never even saw the world the way that I'm seeing it now. That's why a lot of people try to read the classics in their native, language, or the language that it was written in, because you're seeing different nuances of the human experience and you're learning. So I think it's great that we don't have a universal language because
Mhm.
it kind of forces us to see things from different points of view.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why Esperanto never
Right.
succeeded, because, as you just said, it takes away the uniqueness
Hmm.
of that particular culture. Yeah, like, just myself, for example, my first language was actually Spanish. I grew up raised by my grandparents for reasons which I won't go into, but that was my first language, and my first exposure to English was through television and watching, different
Hmm.
programs, uh, and uh, and I think that's one of the reasons why I don't have a heavy Spanish or Mexican accent, as such. That I speak this very kind of middle of the road English, because that's what I heard, that's what I grew up with, that's what I internalized
Hmm.
as English,
Right.
and so that helped. It's helped me enormously, um, and but there's also there's also a downside to that. And you were talking about uh, Pitbull and how people might, even of his own culture, might perceive him as being an outsider now. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, you're not one of us anymore because you
Yes.
speak this way.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of African Americans face that same prejudice
Right.
when they don't speak in this kind of ghetto patois, kind of, yeah, they don't talk like this, man, and I'm sorry for
Right.
that. I'm just using that as an example. Uh, then there's that suspicion of, oh,
Hmm.
oh, you're trying to be white,
Right.
things like that. And, I haven't had that thrown in my face directly either. I sometimes think that maybe some people think, well, yeah, he's Mexican, but listen to him, he sounds like a white guy,
Yep.
and so I just never developed, because I just never, like I said, I just never developed that accent. But there's another side to that. People who do have accents are sometimes, even though they may be incredibly intelligent, they're not perceived to be intelligent because they don't speak the language clearly, because they
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
have an accent, they do have a heavy accent. And I'm not just talking about, Mexicans or Hispanic, I'm talking about it across the board.
Hmm.
If you see a
Chicago
German,
accent. You don't want the Chicago
yeah,
accent. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Going down to Wrigley
Ca-
Park and watching the Cubs play. You know what I'm saying?
It's
Yeah, getting
considered
a hot dog.
lowbrow. Yeah, it's considered
Yeah,
lowbrow.
getting a hot dog over here. Getting a pizza, right? You know what I'm saying, right?
You got to
Yeah,
get the deep dish, the Chicago,
got to get that
Chicago style.
Chicago deep dish. Down there in the Windy City. Exactly,
The Blues
exactly.
Brothers.
Even
It's just
even
the Blues
regional
Brothers.
accents like that.
Hmm.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
you you have we talked about stereotypes in a previous episode.
Hmm.
You have the stereotype of the Southerner. Talks like
Right.
this, and
Hmm.
everybody thinks, well, it must be kind of dumb because He
Yep.
don't he ain't talking right English kind of thing,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. Um, and my apologies to people from the South
You're
who do call that.
apologizing to everyone.
I'm gonna apologize to everything.
It's a blanket
Which
apology.
it's the blanket apology, which brings up another interesting point, and something that I kind of wanted to talk about as well, and that is this notion of political correctness
Mm.
as it affects communication. You know, and it's kind of become a talking point of the right against the left, talking about political correctness and, oh, you're trying to stifle free speech and all that, or we're not allowed to say anything anymore, otherwise, you're going to come down on us, and things like that. And my interpretation of political correctness is, we used to call it being polite.
Yes.
Not calling somebody stupid or not calling somebody a nasty name, uh, just because, so that's, to me, that's a form of bullying. When you
Right.
call somebody, dumb or stupid, or use like a racial epithet or something. Uh, to me, that's no. Why would you do that? Why do you need to belittle someone to make yourself feel better or superior or special, whatever? And that's kind of the roots. Well, actually, the roots of political correctness actually go back to Nazi Germany, but we're gonna kind of gloss over that part.
Awesome. I
It's
told
gonna,
I told Danny before this we're gonna jump the shark today, so there we go. No, I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
yeah.
I'm
We
just
were
kidding.
we were actually we were singing songs. People were like, well, I
You were
was
singing
anyway.
songs. I was just being
We
silly there.
were,
No, that's a very
yeah,
good point actually to tie it
but
into
yeah.
Nazi Germany. We're
Um,
right back to Germany. We were talking about
we're
German earlier, and
right
we're
back to
right back.
Germany. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, and actually, yeah, I looked up the history of political correctness for the program, and it's kind of interesting how that term has changed. Like most things, like most language, changes over time. The meaning of it changes over time. Like I said, political correctness began with fascist regimes, and it meant, language that supported the regime and rejected anything that attacked the regime. And then leftists, uh, political liberals, started picking it up in the 50s and 60s, and used it ironically, used it as kind of a satire on what they perceived as being kind of governmental kind of overreach, again, kind of stifling of free expression.
Mhm.
And now it's come full circle,
Mhm.
or not. I don't know if it's full circle, but it's come around where now the right is using it to attack the
Of
left for
course.
the very same thing, and saying, "Oh, you're just stifling free speech and all this, and you're not allowing us to say things anymore." Well, yeah, we're not allowing you to call black people the N word. We're not allowing you to
Right.
call, you
Mhm.
know, and has it gone too far? Possibly. Yeah. I mean, but
Mhm.
that's
Overcorrecting.
one of the things
That
of
can
human
happen, yeah.
nature, is that we sometimes take things to an extreme, and
Mhm.
then they'll kind of pull them back again. So what may have been something that was supposed to be a positive thing, of trying to make sure that uh, political correctness was originally intended to mean inclusive language, trying to
Absolutely.
include everyone, rather
Mhm.
than these very specific terms, has in a way kind of morphed into, okay, you can't say anything, this or that or the other, uh,
Mhm.
because it might offend somebody, uh, and and when anything becomes, and like I said before, I'm a little tired of this word, of weaponized. I think it's kind of been overused.
Mhm.
But that's the only way I can think of it, is when political correctness becomes weaponized, uh, by any side, whether it's the left or the right, then it becomes dangerous. Then it becomes completely antithetical to the purpose of the First Amendment and the freedom of speech clause. Uh, And I think that anything that threatens freedom of speech, although I do believe that freedom of speech is not absolute, I do believe that there are should be limits to it, uh,
Mhm.
but not in a way of where it's going to limit your capacity to communicate. But
Mhm.
there are ideas and things that I don't think really should. I mean, they should be discussed, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that that opinion should be valued over somebody else's opinion, especially when that opinion might be actually harmful to a group of people. Having the
Mhm.
opinion that gay people are trying to, well, yeah, gay people trying to groom your children or trying to make
Mhm.
them also gay, or whatever. I mean, yeah, there are people who have that opinion. Is it
Mhm.
right? Well, to them it is, but to everybody else who
Right.
views gay people as just being another type of human being, another way of
Mhm.
loving another human being, that's kind of repulsive, you know.
Right.
And to speak out against that, to say, whoa, wait a minute, I don't agree with that idea, and maybe here's why. For them to turn around and say, well, now you're attacking my freedom of speech, or you're denying my freedom of speech, that's just a way of deflecting from the real issue. And I think
Right.
sometimes that's what when right wingers criticize left wingers about
Mhm.
political correctness, what they're really saying is, hey, you're denying me the right to be a bigot or a
Yeah.
racist or whatever, or homophobic or whatever. But it can go too far. Anything that humans do can always go too far. So we always have to be judicious in our speech. You have to be careful in our speech. Uh, Not careful in that politically correct sense, but rather be thoughtful about what we say and how we say it. And I think that's really what political correctness was intended to mean, at least later on, separated from the whole Nazi thing. Is let's be thoughtful. Let's be oh yeah, let's be thoughtful in what we say and how we say it, and take
Absolutely. Yeah.
people's feelings into consideration, or how they feel about things, which is something that I think sometimes people say, well, who cares about your feelings? I'm going to say what I want to say anyway. Well,
Mhm.
you know, there's no reason to hurt people just because you can, just to say, well, I have my freedom. Yes, you do have your freedom, but that's no excuse. So anyway.
Exactly, yeah, and, yeah, and there's so many great comments. We haven't had time to really, like, answer all of them. There's just been so many of them. I can see this is a really popular topic. This is something that people are very passionate about. I just wanted to read this one really quickly because it dovetails exactly with what you said. So MM said, "Maine is having this debate after a neo-Nazi group protested outside the State House yesterday. They're calling for all hate speech to be illegal. But who decides what is hate speech? See, that's a good question. That's the debate. And she says, just personally for her, she wants to see who the monsters are when they show their true selves. That's always been my argument about speech. I always prefer that somebody offends me, but I know who I'm dealing with, so that I can be, I kind of want to know that. One of the things that I think has been detrimental to society as of the last 20 years that sort of came out of the political correctness overcorrection was I've seen a lot of people, either misogynists or racists, people like these neo Nazis, they've rebranded. And
Mhm,
that's really insidious because gone are the days of the hoods and it's sort of black and white, literally, and you just know who you're dealing with. And now it's, there's like, George Wallace blocking the door. Now it's like they're going to say, well, I'm not racist. Look at this. And they're sort of infiltrating in a way that is very stealthy. And it's a
mhm,
different tactic. It's a newer tactic. And for me, that always makes me much more intimidated because I don't know where the enemy is and I don't know what I'm dealing with until it blows up.
Right,
It's like an IED along the side of the road or like a landmine. So
right, exactly.
so MM, you and I see eye to eye. No surprise there on that one. But of course that is the question though. The actual debate, like she said, is who decides what is hate speech. Of course, it matters who's in power, and that's a very interesting question.
Yeah. Well, I've used this example before about uh, whose ox is getting gored here. You know,
Right.
who is getting hurt. And I gotta note the irony of a neo-Nazi group arguing against hate speech and wanted to make it illegal. It's like, that isn't that a little like, cutting off your nose to spite your face? I mean, seriously, guys?
They're flipping
Uh,
the script is what they're doing. I
right,
think
they're
they're
trying to
flipping
flip the
it,
script. Exactly,
hmm
exactly. And that's
which
another
is
thing
disturbing.
is this notion of victimhood and twisting it around to where the people who are espousing certain, you know, negative, I call it negative ideologies, like
Mhm.
racism, homophobia, misogyny, and things like that, uh, when they're called out for that, uh, kind of speech, suddenly they're the ones who become the victims. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
oh no, oh poor me. I didn't. What did I say? What? I'm just offering up an opinion, and that's
Right.
always their defense. Well, it's just my
Mhm.
opinion. I'm allowed my
Mhm.
opinion. Well, yeah, but your opinion sucks.
Your
you
opinion
know
is, detrimental to yourself and me and society, and it's harmful.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that Trump is being confronted with about his words and his actions and inactions on January 6th. There
Yeah.
is a legal thing having to do with, fighting words down in Georgia. They have an ordinance against that. And we've seen throughout history when your words, when your opinion actually, when those things actually materialize and become physical material things that actually hurt people or take from people or change the dynamic. I mean, international law does criminalize speech. That's why
Mhm,
in Rwanda and different genocides, some of the first people they always prosecute are the journalists. That's
mhm,
what's going to happen most likely long term in Russia is all of
mhm,
the Russian commentators. There would be like their version of the Tucker Carlsons,
mhm,
those people can be prosecuted as war criminals in the court of law internationally because they incite. Now, America does have some inciting of violence, of course, as we know. Like someone can't just make a call right now and call a hitman to go and hurt somebody. That's
right,
you're a
right,
murder. If you do that, you just so
yeah,
people, if you do that and you say, "Well, I just said words,"
yeah,
yeah, but you're gonna
yeah,
fry.
and
Depending
there's
on what state you're in, you're going to be
right,
executed. Stop it.
yeah.
No, don't do it.
And there's historical precedent, as you were saying, there is historical precedent for this, going all the way back to, oh, and my apologies, but I forgot the king. He was, uh, there was a priest, a high official, Thomas More, who was very critical of this king, and the king makes this comment, uh, "Oh, who can rid me of this meddlesome priest?" And a few days later, the guy gets assassinated, and the king said, "Well, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't order that. Nobody. I never said. All I
Right.
said was." And there was a recent case, not just a few years ago, where Bill O'Reilly on Fox News kept going on and on about this doctor who was performing abortions, and he kept, calling him a monster and all this other things, a butcher and what have you. And eventually, somebody killed the guy, killed the doctor, uh, in his church. He was going to go to church, and the guy comes up and shoots him. And of course, O'Reilly said, "Well, I never said, he should be killed. I was just, expressing my opinion about this guy. I was just saying he should be, he shouldn't be performing this operation or whatever. This guy obviously was a crazy person who did this, but I had nothing to do with it. I never told him to do it." Really. And so
Exactly.
Trump is now trying to use that same defense. Well,
Right.
I never said you should
Hmm.
storm the Capitol. I was just saying that. I'm just saying that the election was stolen clearly, and that something needs to be done about it. Yeah. Um, so yeah, as you said, there are laws against citing. It's in the It's actually part of the Espionage Act from 1917. It's been amended several times. Um, so anyway, um, so we're and the other thing you were talking about, people sort of going underground, who
Hmm.
have these sort of bad intentions or whatever. Um, there's also the use of coded language, what we've kind of termed as dog whistles. We talked about this whole controversy over the Jason Aldean song having whether or not it has, racist dog whistles in it. Uh, and I saw a wonderful TikTok video, or actually a series of videos by this African American woman who broke down the song like bit by bit and lyric by lyric. And holy cow, yeah, there's definitely some coded language going on there. But just even if you set all that aside, even if you set aside the implicit racism in the song itself, if you really listen to the lyrics, it doesn't make small towns sound like someplace you want to visit. In fact, it sounds like it doesn't make them sound very inviting. It makes it sound like, we basically don't want you here. If you're from somewhere else, we don't want you in a hometown because you might
Hmm.
cause trouble or whatever. And it's a very hostile song. uh, you know, I mean, you listen, and again, I use the comparison of John Mellencamp's song "Small Town,"
Right.
and it
Hmm.
sounds very inviting. It sounds like, yeah, that's someplace that I wouldn't mind living at, you
Hmm.
know. And people are always talking about small town values or hometown values, as being sort of better than those big city things where all the crime and all that stuff, which is kind of what the song is supposedly talking about.
It is, and
But it makes it it's very unwelcoming and very unfriendly, or it makes small towns sound very unwelcoming and very unfriendly, which is not always the case. Small towns are usually very welcoming, very open.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, there's always a little bit of suspicion of the outsider coming in, like, you ain't from around here, that kind of thing. But once they get to know you, and if you ingratiate yourself into the community, then they'll welcome you.
Mhm.
um but this idea of, if you do anything that we don't like, we're going to run you out of town or
Mhm.
freaking kill you. I mean, that's heavily implied. We're talking about, yeah, we got our grandpa's gun, and
Mhm.
things like that. The good old boys. Well, good old boys is,
Yeah,
is
that's
always a
code
reference
for
to
Southern
this quote
justice, yeah.
for, yeah, exactly, for Southern justice, as you just said. Yeah. So,
Well, and it's also just disingenuous, it's a lot of posturing, and it's also a lot of, like, eh I wanna bring this up because I haven't heard a lot of people saying this as well, and I just wanna be really petty for a second, and I wanna just say, a small town when small towns do things like that, they're not powerful. They're not politically powerful, they're not economically powerful, and so if they think that that's the way forward, even if they were to do something to, like, one person or to one group, who cares? There's going to be lawsuits. Businesses are going to pull out. You're going to be economically disadvantaged. It's not a great way forward. I mean, so they're not powerful. That's why they're doing that fake posturing to say, try that in a small town. It's like, actually, you're small, you're diminutive. Nobody cares what you think. You are the past. You're not the future. And I don't say that, like, I love small towns. There's a bunch of small towns that I've either had family living in or I myself lived in that were fantastic. But the idea that a small town, if we murder you, like there's no repercussions because we're a small town. No, you're going to the state penitentiary. Like you're literally going to have that happen to you. So I don't like that these gangs of good old boys roaming the streets looking for someone to harass. It's like what your grandpa's gun tells you or makes you feel safe in that moment, that you're above the law. No, you're not above the law. In fact, even Donald Trump is not above the law. No one is going to listen to you. So I try to always remind people that, because when we're talking about this song and we're talking about these good old boys, remember, the good old boys don't hold the power. That's one of the reasons they're so angry. That's why they're angry. They see the political changes and the shift in where the money is. African immigrants to America now are the highest earners in America, African immigrants. So this is something that if you're a white good old boy, LBJ said it. He actually said it way back in the 60s. And he said, to a poor white man, the only thing he had to be proud of was that he was white. You take that away from him, he has nothing. That's why they're so angry. He said that back in the 60s. So you're seeing that again with the Jason Aldean song. There's so little that if you're a white bigoted person from an economically disadvantaged background, you do feel very much that your power, whatever you had, is being taken from you. That's your idea, is that it's being taken from you by people from other countries who have different accents than you, people from up north, or people, whatever, who have different religious backgrounds than you. And you're very angry. And so you're going to see songs like this coming out. But to me, this is like the last rebel yell. I mean, this is like the dying rebel yell, and so I don't like to feed. And the reason why I got petty there, and I think that was like, it was intentional to be petty, because I think that too many people are getting sucked into that vibe of, well, maybe it's mean-spirited, but we're the tough ones, the racists. It's not about small town. I want to make that really clear. It's not about small town, but this was not about a small town. This was about a mindset of the good old boys who sit on the porch with their grandpa's rifle, waiting for somebody to invite an invitation to get shot. I mean, that's what it is. It's people out of, who have no power. And it's someone that needs to, I want to respect those individuals. They have inherent humanity and dignity, but the way forward for them is not to become violent. That is not going to get them more power. It is going to make them more irrelevant moving forward. So when we're talking to young people who may be white or from disadvantaged areas, and we've seen that a lot with people saying, no one cares about me. I'm just as poor as anyone else, but I'm white, so I don't get anything, and there's a lot of anger. This is, and that's valid to have those problems, but the way forward is not going to be for you to double down on your bigotry. You're going to have to learn how to integrate into society as we share more of the wealth and power, which is better for everyone. If you're not resisting it, they're their own worst enemies. A song like that, a 17-year-old white kid listening to that in Mississippi, that's going to send the wrong message to him. And he's going to make decisions that get him in jail, get him killed, or get him economically disadvantaged for the rest of his life. It's not a great thing to be teaching your kids, and it's not cool to be bigoted.
Right. Yeah. And exactly. No, that's, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. But not only that, it's just the blatant hypocrisy of Jason Aldean to even sing the song, because he didn't come from a small town. He came from Macon, Georgia, which is a big city.
I didn't know that. I didn't. Yeah. Macon is huge, and it's black. It's a black city, by the way. James Brown is from there. Otis Redding is from there. Come on. That's funny. Little Richard is from there.
Right, exactly. Goodness. So
I didn't know he was
and he's
from
not a
Macon. That's
cowboy.
hilarious.
He's
He's
not.
definitely not a cowboy.
He's
I love
he
Macon,
is a
Georgia.
millionaire
Yeah.
many times over.
Hmm.
Uh, and if you want to talk about those good old Christian values, he cheated on his wife and married his mistress. That's the woman that you always see in the video. This little trophy wife there. And I saw a video of her, well, them together, and she is bragging about, well, they're fixing up, this we have this other house on this island, on this private island, and we're fixing that one up now, and we've got decorators coming in and so on and so forth. And I'm like, wow, wow, and here you are pretending to be the epitome of, country strong and
Oh,
country.
that's funny. I didn't know any of that. That's hilarious.
Yes.
And it's
Um,
predictable. Yeah, that
and
that would
and
happen.
not only that, uh, I saw I saw a TikTok. Somebody posted a TikTok and did a stitch afterwards of Candace Owen. I don't know if you know who Candace Owen is. She's a right wing
Oh, yeah,
commentator,
absolutely. She's too
and then
right
she was
wing for Fox, I think. I think she is on a
yeah, she's
news
on a
thing
she's on
now.
yeah, and she's an African American woman,
Mhm.
but she was defending the song by saying, Aldean, and she mentioned this other guy who got caught using the N word of all things. Uh, but his popularity actually went up after that because he
Mhm.
apologized. He apologized for that. So everything's all right now. Um, and she's saying that these guys are representatives of real country. That these, I know she mentioned some other person saying, well, they're just, and she talked about country face, that all these new country artists are just, they're fake and so on and so forth. But these guys, Aldean and this other guy, Waller or Wallen or something like that, are real country because they're talking about this stuff. And I'm like, honey, you don't know what real country is.
Yeah.
I don't think you grew up listening to these people, because there's also another video going around with these four guys, classic country singers. They're usually called the Outlaws, because they were definitely very much on the left. You have Chris Christopherson and Billy Nelson and Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard, who definitely are country, and yes, uh, Garth and Dolly as well, very country, but also what some people might call woke now, which is another word that's kind of been co-opted and is used as a pejorative. But these guys were woke before woke was even and politically correct before
Right.
any of those terms, and they were talking about, and even going back further than that, if you listen to like Arlo Guthrie, for example,
Yep.
his songs were all about the working man and about, but unionizing and
Right.
things like that. Uh, and very politically charged, but again very much a sort of leftist idea. They were not talking about, we're gonna kick your ass in a small town. They were saying, hey,
Mhm.
small town people, you need to rise up, and
Absolutely.
working man, you need to rise
Mhm.
up, uh, and ruling out, like I said, all these guys who I consider to be real. These are the real country,
Yeah,
not
that's real
these,
country.
not these kid, these people coming up now. Uh, and these are the guys that I grew up with. You know,
Country music was it's supposed to be like the voice of the people. In fact, a lot of the same tropes that
exactly.
real country people used to sing about is very similar to what blues men used to sing about and
Right.
what R&B, early R&B, and then a lot of rap. It's
Yeah.
always like the similar, it's the common man's sort of
Right.
music. And so for them to try to inject into it this racist stuff, and Ralphie just said he hasn't heard the Jason Aldean song, but it sounds like they wanted to sell records. And
Oh,
absolutely controversy sells
absolutely.
records. And Jason
Absolutely.
did I mean, he got that song, the little I heard of it, was not to me a clear hit song. It wasn't that catchy. I think it was like, he couldn't get a hit, so you're going to use controversy.
Yeah,
it's a stupid way
a
out.
middling, popish,
right
country song.
It's not like a legendary song or
no,
something.
oh God, no.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, exactly. It's and then country music, and I don't know, maybe I should save this when we talk about music, but country music, and I'm not. I'm going to talk here. Country music has its roots in both Irish ballads. When the Irish came over and settled in Appalachia, and they brought their music, the fiddle and the banjo and the pipe. But again, they were talking about the struggles of songs are about the struggles of the common man. And you had, like you said, blues in the South, which was, African Americans or people of color, their songs about struggles and about, the pain of being oppressed, and as the two groups kind of slowly came together, that in turn became the roots of country music. And it was originally about the common man. And it slowly evolved. And, so you have the songs of woe, of Jolene, or, things like that. Songs about losing your wife or losing your husband to somebody else, or you cheating on somebody. And then, of course, common activities like getting drunk, and things like that. Of course, there's more to country music than that, but that's kind of the cliche. Talking about country music, but it wasn't, and now I think country music has grown. It's just another form of pop music. That deeper, the real roots have been lost. I mean, there's still country artists or roots artists that do, but they're not getting the kind of airplay that an Aldean song is getting.
Right.
But I have read that sales are dropping for the song. It had this little spike because of controversy, but now it's like people are like,
because it was just relying on the controversy. It was a
exactly.
hollow, it's not anything that people really
and
wanted.
Shows are being canceled and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay. Well,
and he was, and
I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to see anybody lose their job or lose.
No,
but
he was a survivor from the Las Vegas mass shooting. So it's bizarre that he was glorifying violence when he's a survivor of violence.
Yeah,
why would you do that?
But as somebody said, it was a money-making effort.
Yeah,
it wasn't there's not a bit of sincerity in that song, and
well, we weren't talking about him, and now we're talking about him. So in a way, he gets rewarded for that. But
right.
But that stuff fades. That is not the best way of getting famous.
Right. It's like people say, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, I know. No PR
and
is
that's
bad
what he got.
PR.
He got exactly what he wanted. He got
the
the
little
bad
booth.
press. He got the pushback, and it made him famous again.
Yep.
People who never heard of the guy. I
I have never heard that name ever.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like he's all over the news.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go ahead and play this final bit. This is by George Carlin, and then we'll talk about it for a little bit.
All right, let's do it.
They're only words. You can't be afraid of words that speak the truth, even if it's an unpleasant truth, like the fact that there's a bigot and a racist in every living room on every street corner in this country. I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat, most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you, if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed at the time. I'll bet you.
Euphemisms.
Yep,
Yeah.
euphemisms. Yep, trying to soften the blow or sterilize it to, like you said, like taking the humanity out
Exactly.
of something, out of the human experience.
Exactly. Yeah. I like the phrase battle fatigue
Hmm.
because it sounds, I mean, battle is still in the name, so there's still association with war, but fatigue, it sounds like you just need a nap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're just
we're fighting the
exhausted.
enemy all day.
You're
"No, I
just
need a nap. I have
exhausted.
battle fatigue."
Yes.
You know, and like I said, operational
Operational. I'm forgetting. It's hard to even remember it. Yeah.
I know, right? Again, it sounds like something that happened to your car. But
Mhm.
again, they took the war out of that phrase.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then post-traumatic stress disorder, even further removed, because that could mean anything, you know. And
Mhm.
that's not to say that people don't suffer from that. It's a
Sure.
real
Yeah. Of
condition,
course. Yeah.
and you know, I don't think he was trying to minimize that when he was
No, I think
talking
he was
about
trying to do the opposite and really
right.
give. Yeah.
You know, and now we know that it's not just combat soldiers that suffer. It's anyone who has suffered a serious
Hmm.
trauma uh, can have PTSD.
Right. It doesn't have to necessarily be someone who's seen active combat. It can be someone in, a domestic life who has undergone those. There's symptoms, right? So there's
Right. There's symptoms of,
MM
but
Farwell would know all about this. She's like an
especially
expert in this.
operational exhaustion.
Right.
Yeah, operational exhaustion.
Mhm.
Again, like you said, took the humanity right out of it. It's not even, you can't tell that that's a war condition or a condition caused by war. It's just, you know, and again, exhaustion is like, oh, I just need a break here. I just need to sit down for a moment, you know, like fatigue. I just need a nap, you know, and post-traumatic stress disorder, it's 4 words that got strung together. And yes, it's a real condition, and yes, it's something that people suffer. But again, it's hiding, like you said, it's hiding the pain of it. You know, it's hiding behind words so that we don't, you know, so we like, it's like, oh well, okay. And I think the military obviously does that or did that intentionally to hide the fact that, hey, our soldiers are getting so stressed and so traumatized by what they have to do that they're suffering this condition. And like you said, you know, when you call it shell shock, I mean shock, you know, I mean that sounds like something that's happening to you. And shell, of course, you know, a bomb. So yeah, now it's a serious condition. But then all these other words hides that fact, you know. So that's one of the dangers of euphemisms, and I guess you could call that a sort of politically correct language as well. You know, again, trying to mask something which might be disagreeable or offensive to somebody, and you know, this is not it's not a you know, trying to be against political correctness. But again, I do agree with Carlin in that sometimes we do need to speak plainly and directly, even if it is something ugly, And I think you, Renee, said the same thing. You want to know, and M. Farwell said, we want to know who the monsters are, and we want to be able to recognize them by the way they speak and by what they say, um, rather than hiding behind coded language, rather than hiding behind dog whistles like the Aldine song. Uh, you know, it's like somebody says, like the phrase says, "Hey, come at me, bro, come at me." So
I've seen a lot of
anyway,
like memes that are very funny with like birds, that have their little, yeah.
yeah, the wings up, come at me, bro.
Exactly. Yeah, and I want to talk about what Ralphie just said and just responded to as well about categorizing us so that they can group us and push us aside, and
Yes.
and using labels to divide us. And I
Oh
think that
yeah.
that's really and to control us too, somebody just said. And this all goes back to narrative. One of the reasons why I think it's
Hmm.
very important to use clear language, especially when we're talking about ourselves, our identities, what we want people to know about us.
Hmm.
It's important to do that because other people will put their narratives onto a group, onto a country, onto a culture, onto an individual. They'll do that all day long until you very clearly define your narrative. That's one reason why activists, are they're considered annoying, and they'll say, "Gosh, you just shove that stuff down your throat." Well, activists who are coming from a defensive position, if you're being
Hmm.
oppressed as in a group or an individual, if you're a victim of something, um, if you're not actively defining your identity and your needs, you won't be able to get them.
Right.
And so using coded language doesn't always work anyways. It doesn't connect you to getting the answers that you need or to getting your needs fulfilled. And even just among common relationships, even if it's an acquaintanceship or a colleagueship or a romantic partnership, whatever it is, you being able to really ask for what you need and define who you are as you evolve. I
Hmm.
think these are very important things because we as people, when we're not communicating, and this will take us full circle, when we're not communicating who we are, and when nature abhors a vacuum, so you're going to get assumptions.
Right.
So if you
Exactly.
don't tell somebody, in other words, if you don't tell somebody who you are, they will put on, it's not a nefarious thing. They're just naturally going to put on something that you might have just said something casually or offhand, or you were making a joke, but now that becomes your entire identity to somebody who hasn't
Right.
upgraded or communicated with you ever since. There are people that I've run into that, yeah, I haven't seen them for 20 years, and they say something about me that, and I'm going, oh gosh, I don't even remember that. And if I did do that, that's not like my identity. You have to upgrade. You have to update and upgrade like who you are to people. You can only do that when you're communicating. So and I think that you also have to have the onus on the other person too to say, investigate, ask questions. I'm always trying to remind people, please ask questions. Don't assume things.
Right.
I've never assumed anything that I was 100% correct about. Whenever I assume anything, I'm always incorrect.
Hmm.
So, you know, you can look at it from a political level, you can look at it from a racism, something. It's people who just haven't had those they haven't communicated with somebody from a different culture or somebody
Hmm.
that they think they don't agree with. And once you start building those bridges, you find out that we agree so much more than we know we do. We just are not having the conversations, and we're not connecting ourselves to that new data. And that's why I'm a big fan of communication. That said, it's tough to have those conversations. Not everybody
Hmm.
wants to. Not everybody wants to risk feeling offended or to really do that work. It takes a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of work, and there's just so many great comments here. I don't know what to do because there's just so many of them. You guys are just nailing it. You're just knocking it out
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
this is
Do
like
do
the
you
best
see
comment.
MM's comment just now?
This one, yeah, I'm not afraid to ask a question if I'm unsure if what I say is offensive. Ray sees me tell guests all the time, if I use language or something in an offensive way, please correct me, even on camera. Dennis Tardon always does that too. He always says that, please correct me if I get this wrong. A lot of people aren't open to being corrected. And that is key, MM. Thank you for saying that, because if you are the type of person who's open and willing to learn and not be defensive, you are going to get so much farther in life. I always tell young people this.
Yeah.
Please be open to being corrected, be open to the constructive criticism. If you're so hypersensitive about that you just don't want anyone to tell you that anything you're doing is anything less than perfect, it's really, really hard for people to have those conversations with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this kind of relates back to a conversation we had with Simone Deloche a few weeks ago about identity and about other people imposing their idea of who you are based
Right.
on, and we were talking about stereotypes, based on stereotypes and images of what we think that person is. And part of that is, I think what you're saying is that's a failure of communication. When we don't take the time to learn about somebody, to learn about who that individual is, rather than just what our perception of that individual is. And I was just going to say, you as somebody who studied the law, who's a lawyer, whatever.
Mhm.
Of course, I know that you had to learn how to communicate effectively and efficiently just for your job alone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So can
Absolutely.
you
And we were taught.
talk about
Yeah.
that just for, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things where, like, so naturally I was a communicative person, but when you go to law school, particularly the first year and a half, and that's before you're seeing clients or anything, you're really having to imbibe and process and understand at a deep level about 700 pages per night of deep, deep court cases. So Supreme Court cases, sometimes court cases from the 1800s. You're having to learn a whole new language, and they just
Mhm.
put you in there, and you just have to do it. And so you become very good at processing information, and then you have to be very analytical and logical. Being a lawyer
Right.
is mostly logic, analytical reasoning, being able to see parallels between this and that, and then being able to use rhetoric to sort of guide somebody through the logical consistencies and inconsistencies. So it is a really I really wish that everyone would have to take a little bit of law school type stuff, because
Mhm.
it sets you up to see both sides of any scenario. I can see both sides of anything, literally anything. Even if you're the person on earth I disagree with the most, if you're Vladimir Putin, I can put myself in his shoes, as
Mhm.
awful as he is, and then that helps me to understand maybe what his next moves might be. But I could
Right.
argue as him if I had to. If there was a spotlight on me right now and they said, "You're Vladimir Putin, you have to argue for why you're killing Ukrainian children," I would be able to put on that mask like an actor and do it. And that's what you
Mhm.
need in order to defeat that. So I think
Right. Exactly.
one of the things that's really bothering me is that when we instantly mute and block anyone we don't agree with, you can't even defeat that type of person, because now you have no access to them, they have no access to you, there's no possibility for change, and you've stopped examining them and monitoring them. You have no empathy, you have no understanding of them. That person can just keep doing what they're doing, and
Right.
nobody's stopping
Yeah. There's
them.
no pushback. Yeah.
There's no pushback, and there's no sort of dialogue there, and I don't know how that serves anyone. So I always try to think, my worst enemy, what behooves me to do with that person? And then the person
Mhm.
that I love the most, how can I protect that person and support that person? The answer in both cases is communication. The answer in both cases is empathy. The answer in both cases is being able to see things from their perspective. I'm in a scenario right now, and I have been for a while where someone I care about very deeply has a misconception about what I've done or said or treated them, right? And I still don't know how to answer that, because that person is cutting off communication with me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
because of that, I'm rendered totally powerless because I can't get my message across to them, and they are not good. It's like if you're like when I was a kid, my older brother, like sometimes I want to say something to him, and he'll cover his la la la. I can't hear you. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
And there's research on this that if you Google it, you'll get to see some of the research. But doing the silent treatment, which is not distancing yourself from somebody who is like stalking you or a criminal. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone that you have an actual relationship with. Silent treatment, when that person just either ghosts you or they just cut you out or they kick you out, it causes physical harm to the victim that is analogous to physical violence. So
Right,
you are committing. So you have to be aware of that, people. I was not aware of that actually. For now that I'm aware, I'm doing much better about that, because if you are cutting somebody off, first of all, you're not able to learn, you're not able to grow, and you're not able to heal, because the only person who can heal a relationship are the people in the relationship. There's no one outside of that relationship is going to bring you that peace, right? If you have
Right.
like if you're not getting along with your dad, yeah, you can talk about it with your friends, you can talk about it with your siblings, but your dad is the one who's going to be able to heal that. You have to be able to communicate that. And I speak
Right.
from personal understanding here. But yeah, silent treatment and just ghosting somebody that you have a history with and that you've really built that trust up with, it causes physical violence to their bodies, and which affects everything else. So I'm trying to get that word out, and a lot of people are getting that word out. That's why when I say communication is key, I speak about that personally. It is physical, and in some people's minds, physical is like higher up in the hierarchy. Certainly in the legal system, if you hit someone, it's considered worse than if you ignore someone. But biologically and the essence of humanity, it's actually either the same or some people will say, I would prefer you had just pushed me down, it depends who the person is. It's like
Right.
how we treat people, what we say, the words we say, the silence that we have, all of these things, if they're done to try to create chaos or harm, or like a Donald Trump thing on January 6th, or if you're a genocider journalist, okay, you're killing people, you're actually hurting people, and I'm pro peace, so I never want to see that happen.
Right.
So for me, but I do want to be open and honest about the fact that as gifted as I am and as trained as I am in rhetoric and in communication and in understanding the enemy mindset, when I'm in a personal, like a family dynamic or a very, very intimate personal scenario, I become overwrought with emotion, and I just go, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't, like, even in this scenario I'm talking about openly with you right now, I literally have not told the person any of this. They don't know that I'm suffering. They think I'm totally fine. They think I've moved on with my life. I don't give a shit. And yet it's something that's in front of me every single day, but I have no idea how to package, because the stakes are too high. What if I say it wrong? What if I don't? So I'm not trusting my communication. And then also the fear of rejection. Cause like once I do that, and then if this person still continues harming me or whatever, that's my last shot. That's my Hail Mary, is to say, stop doing it or whatever. And so I think communication, I wish that everybody on earth, and I try to hold myself to that standard. I did 14 years dealing with death row prisoners, each one of whom, even if they hadn't killed somebody that they were on death row for, they would openly tell you they were living a criminal, usually, even if they were innocent of that crime. They usually were doing unsavory things or gang banging or whatever, drugs, stuff like that. And I would sit face to face with them. I would break bread with them. I would eat with them. I would argue with them. And I'm doing this all as like a very, very young person. And I did it because I wanted to force myself. What is it like to really care about somebody and have compassion for somebody whom is like not a good person? So
Mhm.
I want to hold myself to that standard. Can I communicate with anybody on this planet? I'm at the point now where I can, except if I love you very deeply, and I'm not, and you mean a lot to me, then you will not. It'll be crickets for days. It'll be.
Oh
I will go
no.
10. I'll go 10 years not telling someone how I give a shit about
Oh
because it's like
well.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my message really though, is that people should, we really do need to give a lot of attention to how we're coming across with our words, with our
Hmm.
actions, and to really respect the dignity of other human beings, whether we agree with them or not. Like Jason Aldean, come on our show, Jason, and we'll talk to you, openly. I mean, I would say, and I wouldn't use coded language with somebody. I've met racist people. I don't know if he's racist, but I think it's suspicious that he did the song. But I've known people I disagree with, and I'll say to them, look, like I think that's a horrible thing that you're saying. This. Why are you doing that? And I think that's healthy. I think that's what we should be doing, not just, I don't know. You can't just keep pressing the block button on everyone, guys. You, you do that, you end up
Well, I don't know.
alone
I
in a
can't.
room. No, I mean, you can do it online. You can do it online because that you don't have any history. I'm just saying, like in your life, like if you're
Right.
actually
Yeah. No. Yeah. I get.
creating alliances and you're working with people, if you're working at a big company, a lot of people are working at huge companies. They have to interact with like 50 different people a day.
Right. Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, just speak up, say what you want to say in that moment, and try to understand that everybody's like fighting these private battles too. People, a lot of the
Right.
reasons why people are popping off and acting crazy and offending people is they're upset in their own life. They're already
Right.
pretty
Right.
punished, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. You know
there's so many
what?
comments coming in. I wish, guys,
I see that. I
there's
see
just
that.
I
Yeah.
haven't even gotten to like 2/3 of them yet. So
Yeah. You know, in one of the episodes of Two Guys, we were talking about Alan Arkin and his
oh, I love him.
beautiful movie, Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and that's certainly, of course, he had the added uh, burden of not being able to speak
Right.
and not being able to hear, uh, but he was fighting his own battle, because of his friend
Mhm.
who had been hospitalized and so forth. But and yet he still had an impact on everybody else's lives, at, at, for one at one point or another. Um, and yet at the end, nobody really realized what he was going through, you know. And I think in a way, now that I think about it, and now that we've had this conversation, it's almost like his muteness and his deafness is a metaphor for our inability to communicate, our inability to say I'm in pain, or I need help, or conversely you've hurt me, or you know that sort of thing. uh so you know you have to deal with that situation the way you see best. uh Personally, I've been in that same spot. I'll admit it,
Really?
where I don't know what to say to somebody,
Yeah.
and I don't know, and I know I've hurt them, and how do I remedy that?
Mhm.
And sometimes we feel like words just aren't enough. That you can say, "Well, I'm sorry," or you can say,
Mhm.
whatever, and it's still not enough, because we don't know how that's affecting or how the other person receiving that. Are they seeing it as a sincere apology, or are they sensing that we are being sincere about what we
Right.
said, or
Mhm.
are we just saying that to pacify them, to kind of smooth things over?
Mhm.
Because that's the difficult part, I think. That may be part of what you're dealing with, is
Yep. It
how
is.
how are they going to respond to whatever you say? Are they going to take it
Right.
as you're being sincere in whatever it
Exactly.
is, or are they going to reject it and say, no, you're just saying that?
Right. Exactly. And David just said it. David just said, "I know, Manny, but sending me flowers didn't really seem appropriate. We could have just talked about it."
Well, David, you know, we'll have to discuss that,
It was
offline.
tasteful, David. It's funny too because David came in and he said,
And
"This
that
is
was a
what he."
very expensive bouquet, by the way.
You should have
So,
appreciated it, David. You just
you
say
should have
thank you, and
appreciated it for what it was.
and he said, "I was messaging Renee like an asshole and didn't realize you guys were live." I didn't get them yet, David, but hopefully it's about the show. Hopefully it's about the show because that's what I was asking him about. That was Manny and I
Yeah.
are tag teaming David, but he liked the jewelry. He said in the bubble bath. Okay,
Well, good. Yeah. And
okay.
and the fact that you didn't invite me speaks volumes.
I feel like
So
that was inappropriate, David. You want to talk about being appropriate? I think it was inappropriate for you to not invite him.
that's right, because I love bubble baths.
I
Okay, this
know.
is your weird church.
Imagine the beard. I'm imagining the beard with the bubble bath. It's
Oh,
really
this is,
luxurious.
it gets all fluffy and soft
Yeah.
like a bunny's tail. Um,
But you're right, sincerity, right? No, trying to come across
but
as
right,
sincere.
yes.
I will tell you. I want to tell people this. I have this horrible habit. Dennis Tardon knows this. I I act. I have this physical behavior where I seem like I'm lying when I'm telling the truth, but I'm nervous. I'm a
Mhm.
horrible liar. Okay, like I tend not to lie because I've learned from an early age I'm an awful liar. But when I think I'm gonna be accused of lying, man, you should see it. It's like the word, like I look like I'm lying. I look so guilty. If they ever put me on a lie detector, I'm done because I physiologically, it's like I become someone who's lying, and I'm not, and I'm good, and I'll be sitting there like bright red, and I'll be giggling, and I'll be sweating bullets, going, "I'm not lying, I promise." I'm
I
shaking.
swear.
I swear I didn't do it. And they're like, "Yeah, right, Renee." And I'm like, "No, this is just my thing, but
Sure, sure.
it's my thing." Like I
Putting you
always
away
appear.
for 99 years.
It's like, no. But the lie detector test, it showed your heartbeat was
Look at this. Look at this
look at this,
squiggle.
look at the squiggle. And I'm like telling the truth.
Show
and
us on the doll. Where are you?
It always goes back to the doll. Yeah, hard truths can sometimes sound like lies because we struggle getting them out. Yeah, David, you
Yeah,
got to hit
exactly.
rewind because we just had we had an Oprah show, is what we did.
So,
It turned into like Iana Save My Life, or the Oprah show, when it was like a reality show. I was Kim
You're not getting a
Kardashian.
car, and you're not getting
You're
a
not
car.
getting a car. Nobody's getting a
No one's
Look,
getting a car.
Lily Nay said she does the same thing. Thank you, Lily. This is
Oh,
what do we call it? The I'm not lying, but I look like I am club. And JD said the same thing. He does it. Yeah, it's like an innate guilty conscience when you're not guilty.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
I'm guilty of something, but
I'm
not
guilty
them.
of something. And I think this might be Ralphie, but he said it happens when a cop is behind me. Yeah, like if I'm going the speed limit, I'll be going the speed limit. A cop goes behind me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something
I know
wrong.
you're waiting for the red light. You're waiting for the rollers to come.
Yeah, just waiting, but you're white knuckling.
Or you drive by, even if you see a cop parked on the side of the road, and you're like, "Oh shit, am I speeding? Are my lights on? And you automatically slow down, even if you're going the speed limit. You slow down.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Oh, and then you speed up, and you're like, "Oh shit, am I going over the limit now? Is the cop going to come after?"
And David's talking about this too. Now, I have a girlfriend who she was on the phone with me, and she saw this woman in a parking lot, and she said, "Oh, I like her leggings, Renee. I'm going to go over and compliment her." I said, "No, it's going to be weird. It's going to be weird." And she said, "No, I really want to tell her I like her leggings." And she goes over and she goes, "I'm not weird, but I like your leggings." And I was like, "No." And she said the woman just like waved and got in her car and left. And she was like, "But I told her I wasn't weird." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was the indication that she should
that you are weird.
when somebody
Time to
starts
run
a
away.
conversation, it's like if
I'm
you have
not
to
weird.
tell someone, if you have to tell
I'm not a
someone,
serial killer,
I'm not a
but
serial killer. It's like,
Really?
yeah, I would have
Look at
just
that.
locked my car and just go. Yeah, it's too weird
No,
to
I have-
start off by saying I'm
Yeah.
not weird. I'm not going to steal your car and your valuables. I promise. It's like,
I'm
no.
not here to carjack you. I promise you. Uh,
But anyways, communication. That's what we're trying to.
communication is the key to everything, folks.
Or I'm not
and that's
racist.
what language is
but-
for.
Yeah, if anybody says I'm not racist,
not racist,
but I
but-
already know, we already know.
you-
They've given you the spoiler.
Exactly.
They're racist.
Spoiler alert: you are racist.
You're definitely
I'm not
racist.
saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Right. And there's commissions right now. There's hearings talking
Exactly.
about this very
Which
thing.
is, which is,
Mm.
anyway. All
Anyways,
right.
we've done almost 2 hours, and we have Burn It Down coming up, by the way. We have
Uh-oh.
Burn It Down, a very
Burn
special
It Down's
positive
coming up.
party coming up,
Yeah.
not at this exact moment, but pretty soon we have Burn It Down. So Tom Cheshire, come on. I mean, how fun is that? And Manny is going to be a guest on Burn It Down. They just have to come up with the date.
That's
Maybe you
right.
guys can
Yeah.
speak Spanish together because
Come on.
Tom is
Come on, Tom.
relearning his
I'm
Spanish.
ready. Yeah.
All
I'm ready to
right.
rock. I'm ready to clown, man.
He's ready to rock and roll. Let's do
I'm ready
it.
to rock and roll. Yeah. So have me
That's
on,
right.
dude. Yeah.
I can't
I mean,
wait.
I got the ZZ Top beard going. Come on, you know.
She's got legs.
Knows how to
Knows how to
use them.
use them. Yeah, there you
See,
go.
and
Yeah, I
then it
love
turns
that.
into a musical.
It always turns. We were going to start with Manny singing a song, and it didn't
Yeah,
happen.
but
But
I chickened out at the end.
he chickened out. He
But
chickened
I
out.
did
But
do
you
a little bopping stuff.
and if you the theme song and then the closing credits song that you're about to hear, both of those were written and performed by Manny Zamora.
Created by moi. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So bring us out, Manny, and we'll go right into that song.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, that was awesome, except I didn't have it queued up. All right, do it. I won't make you do it again. All right, here we go. It would have been great, though, if I had it just like drop. I was about an eighth of a second too late, and then I ruined it. All right,
Well,
you're
that's it.
going.
The show's ruined.
The show's ruined.
We can't have this.
Yeah, he's gonna take the cane and just get me out of here. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll go back and check
Thank
all of
you.
your comments. We will. We'll go back in and
Yes.
check them all. All right. Good night, everybody. Burn it
Good
down.
night, everybody.